We're a town planning firm. There is just constant changes happening all the time. So it's hard when you've got clients that come to you and pay you to be the expert. And in Christchurch last year, those went up from 8,000 to 29,000 per unit. I'm writing a 30-page document. You know, it's not innocent till proven guilty, it's the other way around. Christchurch has actually got some really, really high quality developers. We try and insert common sense into an industry where it no longer exists.
Tell me about LG Consulting, just in a nutshell.
We're a town planning firm.
Yeah.
So we essentially help developers, mums and dads, businesses get through the hurdle of getting council approval in whatever capacity that looks like. Resource consents, mostly. So basically they give us their plans and we convince council that those plans are suitable for the site, suitable for the surroundings, and are consistent with the district plans.
This sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
So if I was wanting to subdivide a section, if I already had a house on it, you'd come and do that?
I would. Well, we would be one of the consultants that would come and do that. So obviously you need a surveyor, but we would be who you would use to essentially get it through council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just handle most of that. So if there were other consultants, you'd be the point of contact.
Basically, yeah. Yeah. So we would be the first point of contact for council.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been in the industry since I was 22. So 12 years.
Wow.
But LG's been going at 6 years in April.
Okay. How's it going for you?
It's been fun. I mean, it's a space that at the moment there is just constant changes happening all the time. Yeah. So it's hard when you've got clients that come to you and pay you to be the expert, but then, you know, at a council level and a government level, they're just churning out changes almost on a monthly basis. So it's the challenge at the moment is trying to keep up with the changes so that we're giving our clients the right advice.
Is it getting easier to get getting harder? I thought, I don't want to get political.
Oh, no, you can.
But I thought it was all about
making things easier,
reducing red tape, getting out of your way.
Yeah, we thought that too.
And has it not been the case?
No. It's just changing where the red tape is.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not. I think the intent was always there, but I think as you go through all the different processes at government level of, you know, down the you know, the rank of hierarchy or whatever it is to get things signed off. And I think the original intent has disappeared and it's come out something completely different. You know, with this whole granny flat law that's come out, I think the original, they spoke about making it easier for Kiwis to, you know, build, you know, smaller buildings that have less impact, but it doesn't apply to a garage or a shed. It only applies to a dwelling, which is a house with a bathroom and a kitchen. It doesn't apply to the, you know, the other more common structures that you would see on the back lawn. I mean, I guess there are a few people out there who would like to have a tiny home on their back lawn. Yeah. But wouldn't it be better to have a process that allows someone to build their big shed instead? That to me sounds more, that would be helpful to more people than, you know, building a $120,000, or probably more than that actually, self-contained unit on the back.
More people are going to want to build a shed than a... Yeah. I get it. Like, if I have the Langs were looking to buy a house, I would like a granny flat in the backyard.
Yeah.
That's my priority, but I get it. Like, most people would want a shed. It's something that they can use because they've already bought the house.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my brother, we had dinner with him on the weekend and he said, oh, you know, we're buying this new house out in Raleigh. Yeah. We just want to put a big, you know, workshop on the back, but we're not going to be able to achieve the minimum 1 metre setback from the boundary. So we can just use that granny flat rule. And I was like, no, it doesn't count.
Doesn't it?
No. It only counts for a self-contained unit. What they don't tell you is that when you get a self-contained unit, you then trigger the need to pay for DCs, which is development contributions. And in Christchurch last year, those went up from, 8,000 to 29,000 per unit.
From 8,000 to 29,000 per
on
unit.
average, yeah.
That's when you build it, you have to pay.
Yeah, so for a developer, every additional house they put on a site, they have to pay that. So for
even a granny flat, even a little granny little dwelling thing.
They kind of bring it down based on the size, but you still have to pay these fees that it hasn't been made very clear. You know, so people think, oh, we can put a granny flat on the back and we don't have to do anything else. And you still have to go through the building consent process. It's just a more streamlined process. If there's any natural hazards on your site, you still need a resource consent. There's only certain rules that it applies to. So if it's in like a heritage area or something like that, you know, there's so many caveats to it. It's not as basic and simple as I guess maybe how they intended it to come across. But when you really look into the nitty-gritty of how the policy's worded, there are people who will benefit from it, but I just don't know if it's enough to have made the amount of money that would have gone into passing the law worth it.
Do you see like a lot of that at your level? You would see a lot of it where you see the politics on the TV screen saying we're going to allow you to do this, but then the reality of allowing you to do this is you can't do that. It must be frustrating sometimes.
It is, because we get so many inquiries from people who are saying, oh, you know, we've been waiting for this law to come out. The law's come out, now we can do this. And we have to be the bearer of bad news. Well, actually, you're in a flood zone, so you can't. You still need a resource consent.
Oh.
You know, so they've kind of put across the basic intent of what they're trying to achieve, but there's fine print, you know, that I think people miss, and it can be really frustrating for someone who's waited a year for this law to come in, and when it comes in, it's not quite what they originally sort of intended, I guess.
What are some of the, I guess, like misconceptions or mistakes people make that you see a lot coming before they come to you? Like what?
Getting too far down the process before getting a planner involved. So a lot of people will, you know, especially first-time developers or people who like, you know, mum and dad who have a big site and they want to cut off the back lawn, put a house on there. It's really important to get a planner involved early, because there's things we pick up on because this is our job. We do this every day that sometimes get missed. And those things can be what makes or breaks a project. So especially at the moment with things changing constantly, like new flood data being released, your new policies popping up, the district plan changes or the rezoning or the changing of the rules, having someone who deals with every day, you know, tell you that information before you start the design process or the subdivision process is really important, because it saves you money in the long run. I mean, if you go ahead and start designing a house just to find out that the rules are not what you thought they were, you have to redesign. I mean, that's going to cost thousands, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just getting someone right from the start to tell you, right, these are your constraints, these are your rules. Things like that get missed often are like covenants and consent notices on a title. So they're legal things or legal instruments on your certificate of title that stop you from doing certain things. And those we find were really common that people were missing when designing, say, a new house or subdividing.
What like?
I mean, it could be anything. I mean, a lot of the time the councils use these as a way to enforce specific standards in a subdivision. So you'll have a subdivision, but you'll have, especially the new ones, they have all of these consent conditions or consent notices on the title that say, you know, you can't hang your washing out the front. You have to keep your lawn mowed.
Yeah.
You can't have chickens is the most recent one we've had. Since I started, it's progressively gotten more and more and more complex, because the councils, and whether this is right or wrong, the council's appetite for liability has gone down. So they don't want to take any risks of them being held liable for something. So example, if they approve a house in a flood zone, and in the flood zone there's a huge flood, and then that house gets taken out and someone dies, council's the first place people look to blame.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a local body that doesn't want to have liability for these things happening. And that makes sense. But it's gone too far in one direction now, I think, because you're so limited as to what you can do on your own land. I mean, we went to America for Christmas. We went to Georgia, which is down south, and trying to explain to them that they need a council to tell them what they can and can't do on their own land it's comical.
Oh, get the guns out.
Just like, yeah, that's pretty much what they said. Like,
freedom.
Good luck seeing council come on my land. Like, but it's, we probably, with the exception of maybe the UK, which our whole system is based off, the RMA and how we do consent is very similar to the UK. We're probably one of the most regulated countries in the world.
Does that also like kind of play into your hands and your role because you're actually needed? Because there's so much red tape as a planner, you need to be able to. Well, people would struggle to do it without you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are resource consents. I mean, I'm writing a 30-page document, basically saying this is why it won't affect transport. This is why it won't affect flooding. This is why it won't affect the neighbours. This is why it won't affect the random bird species that's nesting 2 k's.
So you go into bat for the people that are trying to get consent.
Yeah. So I'm convincing council why this project is not going to have negative effects on everything and anything. It's very much one of those situations where you have to prove you're innocent. It's not innocent till proven guilty. It's the other way around. You have to convince council that there's not even the remotest chance that what you're doing is going to potentially affect the neighbour next door. Like, we had a project here in Christchurch where it was a townhouse development and there was a shading, right? But the shading was just on the driveway of the house next door. So just a strip of the driveway was under shade for, I think it was 2 hours in June, which is winter. And they said, we need to get those neighbours' approval. They need to sign off on this because you're shading their driveway. And the kids might play on the driveway. That's exactly what they said.
What's the typical thing when someone walks through your door? What's the typical thing that's happening, or person why are they coming to see you?
Well, I've got some really good relationships now with developers. So they tend to just send us plans. And I say, right, maybe change this, maybe change this, maybe change this.
Right.
And then I take it on from there and we basically submit it to council. And then we deal with all the RFIs and...
What's RFI?
A request for further information.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, we just work with the architect to deal with the council requirements.
And a lot of those developers, do you see quite a few in Rolleston? Because that place is...
Yeah, the Rolleston stuff is huge, though.
Massive.
A lot of the developers there are you're talking 200, 300, 400, 500 lots.
Yeah.
So at the moment, most of the stuff we're doing is here in the city.
Yeah.
A lot of the sort of the townhouse style developments. And then what we call infill, which is basically house on the front, build a house on the back lawn, cut it off, sell it. A lot of that is happening as well.
Is it?
The struggle we're having in Christchurch right now is that we're probably the fastest growing city in the country. People are leaving. People are sick of Auckland. People are sick of Wellington. You can sell your house for 2.5 million in Auckland, come here, buy a house, buy an investment property. So I think that's what's happening. You're getting a lot of that happening. But there's so much resistance to density because we've kind of always been this rural city. So a lot of the money and investment that's kept Christchurch going, especially over COVID, is agriculture, because a lot of the sort of underlying money that is in the city comes from agriculture.
Yeah.
But I think we need to realise that Christchurch it's in demand at the moment, and people want houses near the city. And in order for us to do that, we have to increase density and we have to go up. The rules are definitely loosening, and they've loosened quite a lot in terms of what you can do in the city. But
So how high can you build a house, something in the city at the moment?
Oh God, it depends on the zone. So, I've got an apartment building at the moment going up that we're doing a consent for. I think that's 5 stories, and that's in the high density zone.
Okay.
It's definitely happening, but there's still nerves around it.
Yeah.
Council's still very conservative about it. They're not, and it's not any. I try very hard not to blame everything on council, because at the end of the day, they're just doing their job.
Yeah.
And they're terrified to make the wrong decision because they get absolutely annihilated for it when they do. But there is this balance where you have to embrace that the city's growing. But at the same time, you don't want to do what Auckland's done, where they've grown too quickly. And Rollaston's a perfect example. Rollaston had such an insane burst of growth that they haven't allocated enough land for commercial. So the amount of commercial space in relation to housing is just, it doesn't fit. It needs to be a master plan exercise. But I think after the earthquake, they were just trying to smash out houses, as quickly as possible. I think what's happening now is after COVID, you had a lot of developers come online, because obviously that's where the money was, because there was such a huge housing supply issue. But now people have more choice. So you're finding there's a real you can see the really good quality developments are starting to move faster. And we work, all of our clients that we work with are just awesome. Like, they're the smaller developers. It's not just about yield, it's about the quality of what you're doing and the livability of the house. The Rosefern boys, we work really closely with them, and they're just awesome. And we went and saw one of their developments a couple of weeks ago. Just so practical, like storage is one thing that there's been rules now introduced, because some of the old housing styles just had no storage.
Yeah.
When
you're house hunting, you do that. You go around and you're like, oh, this house is so beautiful. And you walk away afterwards. Like, when you first start, you don't really look for storage. And then you're like thinking about the house, and you're like, where were the cupboards?
Yeah.
Where am I going to put all my junk?
Yeah. Or like ones where you've got the terrace housing and then you've got like a backyard, but you have to basically push the lawnmower through the house to get to the backyard because there's no other access.
Yeah. Do you see, I was chatting to a builder after I was having a beer with one last night, and he was talking about some of the developers. I won't mention names, but the apartments are so tiny and so impractical. They look great from the outside, but they're just shoeboxes. Do you see a lot of that where there are some developers trying to make a quick buck, or trying to, like, at the expense of livability, they're making a lot of money?
This is where I think the council's role is really important, because what happens is if you were to basically just allow them to do what they want, it would all be about yield. And this is not everyone. There's probably only a small amount that are like this. Christchurch has actually got some really, really high quality developers. But it needs to be quality over quantity at the end of the day. This is people's homes. People live their lives there. And I think that's how you get that longevity of selling continuously and not having to worry about sales in a couple of years' time. Like, these houses they'll be there for a while, and they'll stay good quality for a while, and the materials being used are good quality, and the design is not just for the site itself, but it's for the area, and these are all the different things that go. I don't think people realize just how much goes into a development. But yeah, there's definitely lessons that have been learned at the expense of older developments that you kind of look at and you're like, okay, right, we're not going to do that.
What are the common things where that push people into having problems down the track? Like, what are the common things, apart from coming to see you early, the mistakes that create problems down the track for people doing any sort of development?
Oh, it could be anything. It's so dependent on what we're doing. Biggest problems are when they miss crucial bits of information that fundamentally impact what they're doing.
Yeah.
So missing like a flood zone or council change. So when you submit an application, if the rules change between you submitting an application and getting it approved, those rules apply to your application.
The new rules.
So it goes into council, and between that and when you get the stamp on the plans, if anything changes, you then it takes effect on your proposal. And a lot of people don't realise that. A lot of people think that we're safe because we've applied, it's in. But it's not until it's approved that the rules now no longer apply. So I think a lot of people have been caught out with that recently, because trying to keep up with the changes is so hard at the moment, because it's just constant. It's just never ending.
This is going to sound like a really obvious question, but obviously there's a lot of flood zone in Christchurch. Mm-hmm. What's the big problem with building or developing in a flood zone?
Well, there's two. Flood zones don't necessarily mean you can't build, but it determines the floor level. So it determines how high the floor level sits above the ground.
Right.
So sometimes, I mean, we've had sites in Selwyn where council have come back and said, oh, your floor level's 1.8 metres in a 1 in 500 year flood event. You know, that's what we're dealing with. But the other thing that people don't think about is if your site is an area that has a natural flow path, so during a flood, the water flows over your site into a river. If you put 4 houses on that site, that water now displaces onto the neighbouring sites and causes flooding there. So what's happening in Wellington at the moment, because we do a bit of work up there too, is they're now requiring housing to be put on piles to stop that from happening, so that the water can flow under the house instead of it hitting concrete and then going
to someone else's house and increasing the flood zone essentially.
Mm-hmm. And then when you've got like they call TC3 land, which is obviously land that's subject to liquefaction. You know, a lot of people have to do a lot of works on the site to correct land, fill, all that kind of stuff. If you're in a flood zone, that affects that as well. So if your site is a certain level and you fill it up higher, say 30 centimetres, now all of the flood water that would usually go over that site now goes around it and affects everything around it. And so council's really cracking down on that, which that makes sense to me. I think, you know, you've got to make sure that what you're doing isn't going to affect your neighbour's house being inundated. But it's the line. Like, I get that. And there is a place for that. But it's this level of risk aversion that's happening at a council level sometimes, that there has to be boundaries around what level of risk aversion is happening at a council level. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just never going to get anything built, which is what's happening in New Zealand. It's why everything's so expensive, because you need a dozen bloody consultants trying to convince council that there's absolutely zero risk that this is ever going to flood, have liquefaction. You know, now there's a lot of emphasis on urban design. So like, you know, having what they call passive surveillance, is where if you have a house, you need to be able to see the street, because if you can see the street, it's less likely that there's going to be antisocial behaviour on the street. Now, yes, that has a place. But now they're saying, oh, well, you need passive surveillance, but you also need privacy. So if you put someone's kitchen window against the street, what's the first thing that person's going to do when they move in? Put blinds up.
Yeah, 100%.
But then they'll do things like they'll say, oh, well, we're going to do this because we think that when someone lives here, we think they're going to do this. So they're now making assessments based on what they think people will do when they move in.
Oh, fuck.
It's just, yeah,
people can do anything. You're not going to, there's no
only
line.
So much you can prevent. At the end of the day, people are people, and they're going to do what they want. And you can't prevent everything.
You can't put red tape around every single thing. No, you can't. What does good planning look like? Like, what are some examples of someone nailing it?
I mean, once again, it's so dependent on the type of project. Our emphasis is we try and insert common sense into an industry where it no longer exists.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know. But I tell you what, I reckon Christchurch probably has some of the best planning outfits in the country. There's a lot of good planners in this city, a lot. And
I mean, the city looks great.
Yeah.
The city looks outrageously great.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
they've done it well.
I love Christchurch.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
I'm
good.
from Greymouth, so I knew Christchurch pre-earthquake.
Yeah.
And
I mean, every city's going to look good if you're from Greymouth. I love Greymouth, but wow, wait.
could be worse. It could be worse. It could be worse.
Mate, they need a planner. They need a planner in Greymouth.
Yeah, well, we actually do a lot of work on the coast now. So
Yeah.
I started with mining and dairy farming was where I
did you?
started. Yeah, but I started my business. So I used to work for council, and I just couldn't handle being the no man all the time. It was just constantly no. Everything was no. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm such a solution-based person that it like sucked my soul out. Like I hated that everything I did centered around telling people what they couldn't do. And so I just had one particular day and I just had enough. And I went back to I literally wrote my resignation letter at my desk, at my office, handed it in. And it was like one of the most, I had never thought about anything less. Like I just did it. And I thought, oh God, now I have to figure this out. And I had a friend who was a structural engineer, and he was out on his own. And he's like, no, you need to go out on your own. You need to go out on your own. So I was like, fine. And I did it. And then 2 weeks after I handed in my resignation, we were in the first lockdown in 2020.
No.
And I called my friend and I was like, what have you done? And then the council was like, look, we're happy to give you your job back. And I was like, no, this is the world testing me. This is the world, like, how serious are you about this? So I was like, this is a challenge. So I spent the first month of lockdown emailing, cold emailing hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Developers, surveyors, architects, finding work. And then the building industry exploded. And I had more work than I knew what to do with. And we've doubled pretty much every year since.
Well done.
So this time last year, I had no staff. It was just me. And now I've got 2.5 staff. So, yeah, it's been crazy.
So the building industry has exploded, eh? And it's such a good industry to be in. And so you must look back on that decision and just go, it would have been so much easier at the time, especially lockdown.
Yeah. I mean,
to take the money.
One of those cringy people that's basically like a walking motivational quote. Like we've read so many.
What's your best?
Oh God, I don't know.
Oh, give me some motivational quotes. Come on.
I mean, in this particular scenario, I've always said that the universe tests your decisions for authenticity, right? Or the universe rewards bold decisions. I've always believed that. So when you go out and you do something big, you're going to get challenged. And to me, that's the universe testing. Are you ready for this? Like that's testing you. Are you being serious? Are you serious about this decision? Because if it knocks you out that first time, then you were never serious about it. So when I see a challenge now, I'm like, right, this is the universe testing me. Am I ready for this? Right. And so that's been how I've always seen, not always, I've gotten better at seeing adversity as this is, right, something big's coming. This is the world testing me and saying, right, something big's coming. Are you ready for it? Yeah. And I find it's crazy. Like, I'm not one of these, like, I'm very black and white. I'm very like, if I can see it, if I can touch it, it's real. But in this case, I've definitely seen it where something really challenging has happened and I make it through, I get it through it, and then something amazing is on the other end that's completely not even relevant to that situation. So I've always believed that when you're going through something that's really hard or challenging, especially in business, you're being tested because something awesome is coming up on the other end and you need to be able to be ready for that.
That's a good quote. That's what I was looking for. I think, like, for me at Red 9 Studios, we're into our second year now, and that's kind of what we're talking about. It's just like you go, like I always ask my guests, like, for, you know, what advice would you give me, and what advice would you give someone at Red 9 Studio, like someone in their first 2 years, and you're like, I don't know whether you just answered that without me even asking it, but is that something that, you know, is that something that you think applies to all business?
Absolutely. And I think it's so hard now because of Instagram and the highlight reel. Everyone thinks that owning a business is just easy. The amount of people have told me I'm lucky is just horrendous. I mean, oh, you're so lucky. Like, you know, you get to make up your own hours. Like, but you don't see me at 4 a.m. stressing about my tax bill. Or you don't see me not having any work lined up for the next month. You know, I mean, I'm not going to share that on Instagram. Like, that's kind of, I think people go into business with a very unrealistic expectation of how freaking hard it is. Otherwise, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's definitely days where I'm like, oh God, how nice it would be to leave work at 5 p.m. and leave work. But then I look back and I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. I snap out of that one pretty quickly.
Or, I mean, you're doing really well, but like, I guess for me, it's like sometimes I think I know people with a lesser skill set and less business acumen and less experience in the industry that I work in are earning so much more money than me in a job for some of the major media companies. And you're just like, you're wanting to buy a house, you're wanting to, you know, you've got a family, you've got bills to pay, all that kind of stuff. The enticement or the enticing view of like going into a full-time job is always there.
Yeah.
And you're kind of thinking, what am I doing?
For me, it's a values decision. And the fact that I'm way too stubborn and the idea of being stuck on having someone dictate 8 hours of my day. I have a full-blown authority complex. I could not handle that. Like that was mainly the reason I left, was because I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. You know, having to like tell someone when I go for lunch, you know, if I want to go for lunch, I'm going to go for lunch.
Yeah.
I used to get in trouble for it because I was just like, I just couldn't deal with it. It was suffocating for me.
Yeah.
And so for me, even if I'm earning less, our main, like in our house, we've got, you know, our values. Freedom is number one.
Yeah.
In all aspects.
Where can people find out more about you?
Our website, lgconsulting.co.nz.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.